Everybody. Welcome back to the next video in this little video series I'm doing in which we sort of address what we're all experiencing in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, where we kind of explore the experiences we're having, process through them together, and just discover some things along the way. This week, I want to talk a bit about rhythms and normalcy, and then I want to talk about stress, our body's stress response, and I want to talk about self-care as well. I think I mentioned in the last video that something that a lot of us are experiencing right now is we don't have this sense of normalcy. We don't have this sameness in our life, right? Our rhythms are thrown off. And as I mentioned in the last video, that actually has an effect on us because when there's sameness in our life, when there's rhythms and normalcy, it actually helps us to feel peace. And when all that gets interrupted, it can actually activate our adrenal system and sort of cause us to jump into this fight or flight response, which you've probably heard of before. And it can make us feel like we're in crisis because things aren't normal, even when we're really not. Um, it means that like even if you're actually doing well and you're not in any immediate danger, your body can have this internal feeling that you are in danger and then can respond as if you were. This is sort of a primal instinct that humans have. It's a good way to think of it, I think, because it's something that's meant to keep us safe in the midst of danger, right? If something happens and we're kind of immediately going to be in danger, this response is triggered, and it's actually a way that allows us to keep ourselves safe and to respond and to have the energy and the mental awareness to kind of get through that. But the problem is that this sort of primal instinct and this response that we have isn't just triggered by like immediate danger. It's triggered, unfortunately, by a lot of the things that we encounter in our modern life, in our immediate circumstances, um, that aren't actually putting us in any real immediate danger, that aren't actually don't actually need us to have this super elevated adrenal response. Um, I think it's interesting to know too that like it's not always full blown. Like I think when you think of that fight or flight response, you think of like that response that your body has when you slam on the brakes and uh, you just avoid getting in a car crash. You can feel yourself like sweating and your heart rate is super elevated and it feels like you just drank like 3 cups of coffee. And of course, that's one experience of this. But our bodies can have low level stress that's happening that can kind of keep our body's stress response system active for long periods of time. This is something that you might hear called chronic stress. Um, and having this low level adrenal response and stress response going on in the background is not healthy. Something that can have really strong negative effects on your mental health and your physical well-being, actually. If you're interested to know a little bit more about like the science behind some of that, I've actually put a link to a neat article that explains it pretty well, and that's going to be in the description of this video, so you can just go down there and check that out. Um, it's really pretty fascinating how our body works in that way. So, like I said, our body has this response when we're not in immediate danger, but when we're just experiencing things that cause us stress in our normal life. I bet you can guess some of the things that cause us stress, right? It can ramp up this response in our bodies. Some of the big ones might be like the loss of a loved one, or if we're having really strong pressure put on us in our jobs and in our careers. There's lots of things. Another really neat resource that I want to mention is this thing called the Holmes and Rahe stress scale. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it's pretty neat. These two people have made this list that basically ranks many of the things that cause us stress in our life, and you can actually go and look through these and see what you're experiencing, and actually get a sense for how much stress you may be encountering because of those things. I've also put a link to this scale in the description as well. You can go and check that out. And you can even actually process through that list and sort of check things off and get sort of a total stress level for yourself. It's an interesting tool to kind of do some self exploration for sure. But one thing I've noticed when I was looking at this scale of really stressful things that people encounter is that, a lot of things that we're going through in the midst of this COVID-19 crisis are things that are on that list. Um, there's things like sickness or financial issues or relational problems. And there's lots of stuff that's to do with change. It's not even stuff that has to do with negative stuff, perchance. You'll just notice on the list that they've put change in work hours or conditions, change in living conditions, revision of personal habits, change in church activities, change in number of family get-togethers, or number of arguments with spouse in a given period of time. So there's all these things that are listed that no doubt we're all experiencing right now because we have all these changes happening in our life. And something that's mentioned in that resource is that if you start to accumulate a lot of these stressors, you have a really high risk for basically a breakdown in your health. Um, so if you're feeling stressed right now, I just have to say I'm not really surprised. Um, and even if you feel like maybe things aren't that hard for you right now, you may be actually more stressed than is immediately obvious to you. Um, Something I want to say that's been important, I think, in this time is that just because you're blessed doesn't mean you aren't stressed. Now, did I intend for that to be a silly little rhyme? Not exactly, but it works out. Uh, I think that in the grand scheme of grand scheme of things, like for example, I'm totally okay, right? Because of this crisis, I'm probably never going to be forced to skip a meal or have to go without shoes or shelter. I'm still healthy. And I think a lot of people are experiencing it in this way. There's not uh, that much lack of blessing in their life, but that doesn't mean that you can't experience stress and then you're not experiencing a great deal of stress. If you look through that list, you'll see all these different kinds of change that bring on stress into our life. So you don't have to be embarrassed at all, and you definitely don't want to spend time denying the fact that this thing is affecting you and that you are undergoing some sort of stress. Um, I know one thing that uh, can cause uh, that stress can cause is a change in our eating habits, and it's actually funny because in the survey that we put out, sort of asking you all at MCC how you're doing, a lot of people noted that they had a change in their eating habits, which is kind of funny. I think it maybe indicates that we're a little bit more stressed out than it maybe even we realize. Don't worry, I'm dealing it too. When I'm stressed, I just want to eat delicious food all day. Come to think of it, I kind of feel that way even when I'm not stressed, so I'm not exactly sure what that means. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that with all this change, with this lack of normal rhythms that sort of bring us a normal feeling of peace, it's likely that we're all feeling a bit stressed out. Even if you may not have really noticed it, maybe you just feel a little bit off. There's probably a chance that a lot of that stuff on that list is happening to you and is causing you stress. So, what can be done, in the midst of stress? In the midst of a lot of elevated change, in the midst of a time when we might have this sort of low level adrenal response happening in our body, that's sort of pumping these chemicals into our body, making us feel like we're in crisis and can be affecting our mental well being and our physical well being. Well, we have to kind of obviously, we have to engage in better self care. That's that's kind of what we've got to do. As an adult person, you have your friends and your family who can take care of you in some ways, but at some point, if you really want to be healthy, you've got to make the choices to care for yourself. You've got to have self-care practices in place. Um, and some of you might be, watching this right now and being like, "Wow, after everything you said, I still feel pretty well. Like I'm not feeling that stressed out. I think I'm doing fine." And I would encourage you that if if that's true for you, that I don't want you to click off of this video because now might be a time where you really have the chance to improve your self-care and actually truly be healthy. I think it's crazy because so often the measuring stick that we have for self-care is like, what's the minimum that I need to do to continue functioning? Maybe the minimum I need to do to be somewhat of a healthy person and to have a pretty low risk of flipping out on people for no reason. And I don't think that's a great default, even though that's where a lot of us sit. I think we ought to ask a lot more of ourselves to be engaged in self care at a level that allows us to feel like genuine peace and to actually enjoy life a little bit more. To be people like who are so full of grace and love that it'd be a challenge for anyone to make us lose it, right? rather than just being on the edge all the time? What if we were just doing so well and we were able to respond to people with love, right? I love to remind people that Jesus is more concerned with who you are than what you do. And I think self care falls right into that, right? If we have the ability, which I think all of us do, we have to let go of the need to be productive. We need to grasp on this need to be well. I think that's a far better legacy for us to leave, a far better way of living, to be somebody who's uh, taking care of oneself, who's engaging with Jesus so they could be somebody who's healed, somebody who's actually soaking up life, um, and somebody who's dealing with other people in their life with abundant ease and grace and love, which I think all flows from good self care and having having interactions with Jesus, of course, as well. Um, I know from the survey that a lot of you responded that you feel like you're not taking great care of yourself. And I know that at times I really struggle with this too. For as much as I know I need to, sometimes I just fail myself at taking good care. Um, Even if you feel like you're doing okay, I want to again urge you that this needs to be a big priority. And if you're finding yourself in a season with margin, stop listening to that guilty voice in the back of your head that's telling you, fill your time, get more done, right? Actually take this extra margin, this extra time that you might have, and take the chance to take care of yourself in a real way. Maybe lay down a pattern and a norm for your life that you can carry forward from this time, where you take seriously being a person who's well, rather than a person who's just productive or is just on the edge of well enough to function. Um, I want to make a note that obviously some of us right now have less time than others. For some of us right now, self care is more of a necessity uh, rather than a luxury. Some of us have a lot going on at work. Some of us have a lot of people, counting on us. So it's not like we can sit around and get massages all day and spend time in meditative prayer. But I want to mention a few things that I think all of us can do. A few simple ways that we can begin to take seriously the fact that all this is probably bringing us stress. Take seriously the fact that we are meant to be people who care for ourselves and who can respond to others lovingly. Um, I think one really cool thing that you can do is sort of something that can sort of help you process what's going on. I've mentioned in all these videos that when a crisis happens in life, one of the things that we really need to do to get through it in a way that's healthy is to actually intentionally process what we're experiencing. So a way to do this is in the loss of all these old ways that we were doing things, and the loss of our normal rhythms. We need to make a list, or sorry, we don't need to, we can. We could make a list of what's your new normal. You know, what are the things that you're doing now in your life? What does a new day look like for you right now? What is it? Who are you going to be seeing during this time? All these things. Make a list and write down as much as you can what's normal right now. And then spend time digesting this, just thinking through it, looking through it, recognizing it, and praying over it. Asking God for peace about what is your new normal. What are the new rhythms of your life? What is the new sameness that you kind of need to be accustomed to in the midst of this time? Uh, Another thing that we can be doing to take better care of ourselves in this time is to actually establish some new rhythms, right? So by default, there's a lot that's changed and we've sort of adopted a new normal, right? Which is what we want to process through with that list. But it's actually really helpful for you to intentionally put in some things you can count on, specifically some things that are part of your new normal and that can be new rhythms for you that bring you life. I have a friend who's doing a really simple thing, but I admire him for it. He's making sure he's going for a walk every day at noon. He's busy with work, but he's committed to that thing. So that's a great example. So think about what that could be for you. What's a specific practice that you could put in your life to be a new rhythm that brings you life? The next thing is to lean into a new hobby and commit to engage in it, on a regular basis, even if it's just, like once a week. I know Kara, my wife right now, she's leaning into gardening, right? And of course, you might guess, I'm fishing more and trying to get out and do that to take care of myself and to lean into that hobby. The most important thing we can be doing, of course, is taking care of ourselves spiritually, because the truest rest is found in Jesus. The truest renewal is found in Him as well. So I think one of the best things we can do right now to take care of ourselves is to commit to some sort of spiritual practice, some sort of spiritual rhythm that really feeds your soul, something that restores you. And for everyone, I think this kind of thing is different depending on who you are. And if you're new to faith, maybe you don't really even know yet, and you're still kind of exploring those. I know for me, one thing that seems to feed my soul and seems to restore me is an experience of meditative prayer and trying to do this with some sort of regularity. I've actually put another link in the description of the video below to an explanation of a kind of meditative prayer that's called centering prayer. I would encourage you that if you're kind of looking for something to do, maybe give that a shot and try that out and see if that's something that you can do to work on your spiritual well-being and connect with God. So those are a few things you can do, simple things you can do to adjust to all these new stresses, all these new changes, and to take better care of yourself. I hope that some of this was somewhat interesting to you, some of it was somewhat helpful to you. If you'd like to talk about this, I'm totally available. Shoot me an email, give me a call. I love it when people reach out in response or reach out and just want to chat about anything. So please do that. As always, I just want to pray for you before we go. Jesus, thank you for the fact that you desire for us to be well, that you care about us more than what we get done, Lord. I pray that you would help us as people to take seriously the call to be healthy people, that we would step up and take care of ourselves. We put in new rhythms that can give us a sense of sameness, that we put in new rhythms that can restore and refresh us so that we could be people who are living a life of joy and ease and a life where we can respond to people in grace and love more easily. Jesus, I pray that you'd be with everyone who's watching this, that you would be um, showering them in your love, that they would know that they're not alone in this. I pray all these things in your mighty name. Amen. Okay, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Talk to you soon.